Hey, Dave, how are you?
Hey, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm good. How's everybody?
Nice to see your friendly face.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody is good. Kids are growing like weeds.
What do you
Life
have,
is
two
good.
now?
A little hectic, but life is good.
Yeah, what do you have, two now?
Poor Charlene had to chase me to get this all scheduled. She kept emailing. It's like, hello, hello, are you there? Matt said you do this. I'm like, I know I do this. I just have to find a moment. And it took me a minute to get back into the whole Zoom thing because I thought I had to come down to do it. So I had in my head that I had to make sure I was down at the beach. I'm like, wait a second, we're doing this via Zoom, so this will be a lot easier.
I love Zoom. I must go to 3 meetings a day on Zoom.
It drives me crazy. I'm not a huge fan of it because I kind of feel, first of all, I don't like to see myself on video because I'm reminded that I'm losing hair. And
I feel terrible for you. I feel really bad for you.
But yeah, Matt does these Zoom calls practically all day, and there's no way I could do it.
I love it.
Too much of a people person.
Yeah, I thought I was too. And then I'm like, I like all this, being able to get everywhere without having to drive anywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I think my favorite thing about the whole the COVID thing being shut down was the ability to just wear shorts the entire time. It's like I hardly did any laundry. You know, no dry cleaning, stuff like that. It was awesome.
Since there's hardly anybody in the room, I haven't even shaved. I worked out, had my lunch, did some work, and I haven't even taken a shower yet. I'm still in workout clothes.
Well, I got up and got going every day, even though we were shut down. So we didn't sit around the house, which was good, you know, but your schedule is just all different, you know, but now we're back in the same old mode. So
Really? You guys are going full steam?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're kidding. I was in the last 3 months, I think I've put 34 houses under contract.
Wow.
So it's been pretty busy. I mean, it's been really, really busy. Last month was busy, wasn't as productive, but and most of those are buyers. So
Yeah.
that's you know what kind of hustle it takes to get buyers under contract, and it's all so competitive, you know. But it was running. I was running, yeah, and quickly realized that I didn't quite have a bandwidth to maintain all those pendings. So it's fine to win multiple offer scenarios, but when you win them, you got more work to do.
Yeah, really.
So, so did Charlene send around the document that I sent to her?
No. What document are we talking about?
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm going to go to my email and check because I don't want to lie on her, but I know I saw an email that Dave Maio was doing the class today, but I didn't really get to look at the whole email, so it may have been in there.
Okay. Yeah, I sent her a document. It was titled win a multiple offer. Win a multiple offer scenario.
Yep, I found the email. Let's see if it was in there.
If not, she said Dawn's going to give me the ability to share my screen, which that'll be interesting. See if I can do that. Although it says share screen at the bottom, so I should be able to do that without a problem.
Yep. Hey, this is Dawn. I gave you co-host ability, so you should be able to just click down there to share the screen.
Okay.
And hopefully that works.
Okay.
Look, there you go.
All right. Well, that's good.
Yeah, but what's the document you wanted to share?
What's that?
Is this a document you wanted to share? Is this what
Yeah, that's the one I sent Charlene originally. So as long as you all can see it on the screen, we'll be good.
Yep, be good.
Okay. All right. So should we wait just a few more minutes? Are we on beach time?
Probably.
So does anybody have any, let's start by the people who are here. why don't we start with any questions or things that I can make sure that I cover during this? Because I want to make sure that not only am I going to share the stuff that I think is valid, I want to make sure that if you've got questions or things that I can comment on, I answer those. So anybody have anything?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm Barbara from Bethany.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. I've had a series of buyers that we ended up being in a multiple offer situation. A few of them we won and a few of them we lost. And, a couple times the listing agent might say, I'm expecting multiple offers or some are coming in. And I've noticed where some did come in and the listing agent won both sides, as a total agent. And when you have to like reveal that to your buyer, they get upset thinking that theirs wasn't dealt with fairly. And I said, well, more than likely they probably had their broker kind of negotiate with the seller because ultimately it's the seller's choice. But it creates a bad taste in your buyer's mouth when they realize that the listing agent was the winner, and it happened on multiple ones.
Right.
Which can happen, but they don't like it.
So do your buyers specifically ask you that question, or is that information that you share with them?
Well, they'll ask me when they'll say, so I didn't win, so who won? And I'll say, I don't know, and they'll ask me, those that are sort of savvy will say, was it another brokerage, and then I look and I see that it's the listing agent, which is a dual agent.
Yeah.
And I said that often I would believe that they would go through their broker to kind of handle it so that they're, not the one really negotiating, that it's done fairly.
Right. I mean, I think, I just actually went through that about a month or so ago. I was the buyer's agent and the listing agent accepted, it was her husband who represented the buyer. So, and I had a really direct conversation. She gave me a sort of a stock answer, which I didn't appreciate because as an agent I know in the area. So I called her manager and I said, look, what was the process like? She's not giving me any information. So, the manager explained to me the process that they followed and how he was involved in it. So I was able to explain to my client, this is how they told me they handled it. And then I usually follow that up with, if it's similar to the way we would do it, I say that's exactly the way our team would do it, or I would do it. I'd get a colleague of mine or whatever, and I'd sort of validate the process and say, that is a standard process in real estate. I think buyers are really creative and they come up with scenarios that are just out of this world because they've watched enough HGTV and reality television. So I feel like if you trust what the agent's telling you, just reiterate that and say, yep, that's the way we do it. And then hopefully that eliminates that, sort of begrudged feeling.
Right.
I've asked before I submit the offer if they represent the buyer. And then if they say, yes, they represent one, then I ask that it be presented to someone else. I do that beforehand.
Yep, that's a proactive way to go about it, for sure. Yep, that's really actually incredibly proactive. That's great. Usually I find myself so frantically trying to put the offer together, I don't have that question. I've spent a lot of time well, you'll see as we go through this form that I've gotten. I'm happy to email it to any of you, so we'll just have to figure out how to best get email addresses, or I can just type mine, you can email me and I'll reply with it. But I spend a lot of time building that relationship with the agent if I don't have it, because I kind of feel like if I can already partner with the agent, that gives my client a heads up. But in any case, any other questions that we should cover before we start?
Can you open your chat box so we can stick our emails in there?
Oh, I don't know. Can I open my chat box, Mike?
If you go to the bottom of the screen, and you hover over the bottom, you should get another bar that opens up in your Zoom. Go towards the bottom of the screen in the Zoom.
I just opened my chat box. You can tell that Matt is the techie one on the team. All right, so that's open now.
Well, you can tell Matt you had Mike Montalvo here, so you didn't need him today.
Okay, excellent. I will tell him. He won't be surprised that you were part of it. You're always a part of it, Mike. So I don't know, for those who don't know me, I'm Matt's partner, and I've focused on buyers for about 11 years since I've been in real estate. It's been the primary source of my business. I have started doing listings in the last few years, but buyers are where my heart lies. And as you can imagine, the last couple of years have been a little bit challenging just because it's been such a strong seller's market. I've closed probably 470 some deals in 11 years. And so I've been around the block a few times. He graciously offered, since I've been doing a lot of multiple offer situations, he offered for me to share some ideas with you guys, just because, you know, it's always good to share. And some of these things have worked really, really well, and they're goofy little things. Some of them are goofy, some of them are, you know, a lot more serious. But I've tried to put this list together, and as you see, would it be easier if we didn't screen share if I send it all to you now, or no? Or are you guys fine with just
Like
leaving?
No, I would love it now because I'm trying to take notes and I am trying to figure out how to screenshot this. I can't get it done.
Okay, hold on a second. I am, so I will, okay. Let's see what I can do now. So do we have any more? We can talk about other questions if we've got other questions while I'm loading some of these email addresses in here. All right. So no other questions from anybody? No other frustrating moments in the current market?
Well, I wasn't around for like the last time I feel like there were this many multiple offer situations. And I was trying to work with a buyer in Newcastle County, and it just didn't work out because I couldn't get up there enough and things were literally flying off the shelves with probably like 12 or 13 offers. And I know people were waiving inspection contingencies and going way above asking. And I guess, I mean, we don't have that here, so I don't really have a problem with that, but I just didn't really know how to win in that type of situation.
Right, right. It's one of those, it's one of those things where you really have to sit down with the buyer and you have to really painfully explain the current market and the situation that we're all in, you know, and the buyers are in. You've got to take the time and really set the stage so that they know when they're going into it, you know, if they're not willing to do certain things or they're not even able to do certain things, that it's just going to be a longer road, and that you have to set that expectation. That's the best way that I think I've been able to manage the clients that are really looking in competitive areas. I've got buyers right now that are literally on their 9th offer, and they just keep getting beaten out by buyers who have more cash assets and are putting bigger deposits down. They're conventional financing. They typically put in a clause to completely tone down the inspection process. They, you know, put a big deposit down. They do all the tricks, but they've only got 5%. They can't magically come up with 20%. So, but they keep getting beaten out by people who are putting 20% down or 30% down, and even if their price is higher, they go with a buyer that seems more financially secure.
Well, not only that, but I guess my concern too for those particular clients is I know it's way over market value, and if they want to turn around and sell it in a year, that's probably not going to happen.
Well, right, but that's another hard conversation you've got to have with them. You know, and this happens all the time. I mean, we've got situations where they're guaranteeing, you know, more than 10% over appraised value. And I look at my buyers and I say, I don't know about you, but do you want to be in a short sale situation in 3 years? I mean, I feel like I'm a little bit doom and gloom, but I do not want a buyer that I'm representing to put themselves in a financial situation that they're not prepared for. And they're like, well, what if we're gonna stay long term in the house? I'm like, well, that's fine. If you know you're gonna stay there. I said, but life has a funny way of, you know, throwing you curveballs. And, you know, if I really truly have been asked many times, are you trying to get me not to buy the house? And I say, no, I'm trying to make sure you're buying it in a very educated fashion. I wanna make sure you know as much as you can know. I can't paint every scenario, but I'm gonna bring out the ones that I think are concerning.
Okay, I just didn't know if like, I mean, I do what you did, and I don't want to say, I was just kind of, I don't want to say I was against it, and then I was like, I'm a terrible salesperson. But yeah, I guess I was like, I don't know how to win these.
Yeah. And I think to me, just you have to be honest and authentic. And, you know, I really truly look at this as I'm consulting somebody on how to make probably the biggest purchase of their lives. So it's my duty to give them every option and all facets of it. You know, I've got clients that are looking at new construction now. Well, new construction, you're generally going to pay an absolute premium. And what's going to happen a year from now? Is the new construction going to be at the same premium? You know, I explained to them, you know, about having protection in case the builder lowers the base price. You know, you gotta write that language in, because if something happens before the house is complete and the builders lower the base price, you got to have that conversation up front. Because I mean, I think the market's going to shift. And new construction is a big risk, in my opinion. I mean, I got into real estate in 2009, right as, you know, right as everything was tanking. And all I saw were short sales everywhere. I saw whole communities, you know, that were basically short sales and foreclosures. And it's because they were built at the height, they were brand new, everybody overpaid, you know, because the values were inflated. And I think I think it's really important for us to be able to, without bias, be able to communicate that to our clients.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think prices are wickedly inflated.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and again, and sort of another story is that I had a buyer who is a police officer, and he was in the military, and he was doing a VA loan, and he had essentially $2,000 in the bank. And he said, I need closing costs covered. I need seller assist. I can't put anything down because I'm doing VA. And I'm like, well, Paul, this is going to be a long road. I said, can we do it? Sure. But I said, we're going to have to look at specific type of properties in specific situations and hope that the seller is willing to offer you a credit below the value of the house, because that's just not happening frequently right now. And we even got to the point where he lost out on a couple houses, and I said, maybe now is just not the right time for you to buy a house. And he said, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I said, you've got certain requirements that you have that are fine. It's fine to have them, but it's just not the market for them. And literally within a week, we found the right house at the right price. We were able to get the assist, and he closed for less than $2,000. So
Awesome.
it was sort of getting him in the mindset. And then we looked at the right house. That was just, it was the perfect blend. But it had been on the market for a little while, so you knew there was room there. He offered list price, and it just worked out. But then he was on the same page as me and going at it the same way. So, but yeah, it's tough. Newcastle County is especially, it's super competitive, especially if you're looking in the 175 to 250 range. Holy moly, even up to 300, they're going to fly off the shelf.
Yeah, that's where I was. And I was literally writing an explanation in line 32 longer than I would have ever written so that it was clear. It was just crazy.
Yeah. Well, then hopefully some of the things that I've done in here will help you, because I think that I think some of these things really make a difference. I mean, obviously, I don't know if they work every time, and everything's dependent upon the seller, but So the first section that I did is really just things to remind the buyer. Buyers love to use the term bidding war, and it's just not the case. So I squelched that really fast because I'm like, there's no war. All you're doing is you're just putting forth the best combination of terms that you can put together. So I immediately take that language out of there because I don't like that. It's not about that. Now, some, I think, listing agents will handle it that way. It doesn't mean you have to play that way. So I like to kind of get that out of their head because that immediately sort of starts to, it starts to undermine a productive kind of, put together of really good terms. I have had so many buyers that spend a lot of time speculating what the other buyers offered. I talk them through that too. I'm like, you can't worry about that. I said, because if somebody's insane and wants to guarantee 20% over appraised value, let them spend that money. You can't control that. And if you're not willing to do the same thing, that's fine, but you can't control somebody else's, choices that they make. Highest and best, again, it depends on what, how an agent treats it. And I think all agents are different, but highest and best means exactly that. There may not be another opportunity to negotiate further. I think that's important to bring up to buyers so that they understand and they don't say to you, I would have gone $5,000 more, because we've all had that, after they lose the deal. Well, I would have gone higher in price. Well, you had the opportunity to say that. That was your opportunity. So make sure that's clear. And then, I don't know, I'm starting to get pushback to the personal letter thing now. What's that? Oh, somebody said something. I'm starting to get a pushback to the personal letter thing. People are saying it violates, what is it? Equal housing, blah, 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 whatever.
What?
So, yeah, they're saying it's just, everybody's oversensitive to absolutely everything now. So they say a personal letter could, create an unfair playing field if the seller connects to the buyer for a reason that other buyer can't. Like, it's all too PC for me. If a seller can't make a logical choice, if they can't make a good choice and they get swayed by something emotional, that's their issue, in my opinion. But I'm not a broker and I'm probably not allowed to say that. But I have used personal letter quite frequently. It's a basic format. It basically talks about, I tell the buyers to introduce themselves a little bit, say a little bit about them, because the funniest little thing can connect to a seller. So whether it's where they went to college, if they have the same type of dog, if they're in a situation currently where the seller was when they bought the house, that's even one offer sometimes. But I start by having the buyer talk about themselves a little bit, then talk about the house and why they love the house, and then usually end on something positive, like, I know you've got a lot of offers to choose from, but we would really love to make your home our new home and take care of it as much as you have. So, and then usually a family photo is a big thing too. I did that a few years ago, and that totally sealed the deal for the woman selling the house. So pictures are worth 1,000 words. So those are the things that I go over with the buyers. Anybody have any additional thoughts on that? I'd love to add to the list if you've got thoughts or things that have worked for you.
I think, David, that if you disclose your nationality, your race, or your sexual preference, all those things, and giving a picture would totally give that away, would be violating, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and maybe that's, yeah. I've actually had buyers in the past say something about they noticed that they brought up Catholicism in the letter, and I was a little bit like, oh gosh, I don't know about that. And I was raised Catholic, so this is why I have a sensitivity to it, I think. But it was a little bit like, oh gosh, is this crossing the line? But I didn't tell them to write that. But I think you're right, Joanne. I think that there is we have to be sensitive to it. So, like I said, a lot of I'm getting now from listing agents, our broker just told us not to present these letters. So. And that's fine. I don't usually fight it if they say that. I provide it if the buyer thinks it's a good idea or buyer wants to do it. Because there's really nothing stopping them from dropping it in the seller's mailbox if they want.
Sure.
But you're right. I definitely have to be sensitive to the things that we know are illegal. So for the contract terms, so forgive me because I saw probably 65% of what I sell in Pennsylvania and about 35 to 40s in Delaware. But everything I do is generally Pennsylvania contract driven. So I had to really go through this and make sure that it applied to the Delaware contract. So if I missed a couple of things, please call me out on that. So sale price, obviously, we all know that, you know, generally, if it's on the market just a few days, you either have to offer list price or above. I've had buyers question if it was the market value, if it was overpriced, and there are more and more situations that are happening now where the house is overpriced because the seller thinks they can get it, and most often they get it. So I don't know if it always appraises because I don't generally follow contracts that I don't get to, you know, to settlement. There's some that I do, but we haven't noticed a huge problem with appraisals in this area. But sellers are definitely getting more than list price. So a lot of times, if you feel like it's even slightly inflated, I always just encourage the buyer. I'm like, well, you might not even be competitive if you come in below, and you've got an appraisal if you're financing. So if you think that that price is what you would be willing to pay, then offer it. How frequently do you all use escalation clauses?
If it's multiple offers, all the time.
Okay. How do you find them to be received?
What do you mean?
Well, like, does the listing agent, do the sellers ever, do you find that they work, or do you find that the sellers sometimes get a little put off? Have you gotten any of that message?
No.
I just won one last month, so it worked
Okay.
for me.
All right. Well, that's good. I mean, I think if escalation clause is applicable, then you should use it. One of the things that I've started to do is change the amount. I mean, everybody historically here in this area has always done $1,000 as an increment. I've now changed that. I've upped that increment to a solid number, or most recently we did a really interesting, like in my example here, 1673, because they were going to max out at 375, and instead they maxed out at 376, 673, which is an increment of 1673. So you just have to get creative with the numbers, because I think that, like, the Price is Right, the person who bids that extra dollar wins. So I feel like, you know, in real estate, you just got to make it more than $1. But to make it that jump, if somebody else comes in at 375, then your buyer suddenly has the higher number. But I've definitely increased that increment, because $1,000 is great, but $2,500 speaks has a higher voice to it.
Can I ask you why you put if you have a relationship with a listing agent? Are you going to piss somebody off if you don't know them?
Well, I've run into a couple times where the listing agent will say, we're not accepting escalation clauses, or like there's a really negative reaction to it. Because, you know, if the gap is big, so, you know, if the house is listed at 350 and you escalate up to 390 and you really offer 360, then, I mean, that's a big gap. So like, you have a buyer saying, I would be willing to pay 390 if somebody else is as well. You know, so I've had a couple pushbacks. So I feel like escalation clauses for me work better if I know the agent and I can talk to them about why the buyer's doing it.
Yeah, I asked the agent the other day about should I do an escalation clause, because she said multiple offers were coming in and they were not reviewing offers till Monday. It just happened. I showed it on Saturday, and it said in the MLS on the agent remarks that all offers will be reviewed on Monday at 5 o'clock. So I called the agent, and I don't have a relationship, and I asked her, do you suggest I use an escalation clause? And she said absolutely. So I asked the question.
Yeah, I think it's good to set the tone in advance. And the reason why I said if I have a relationship is because a lot of times then I can pick up the phone. I know I can call Teresa Tarquinio and say, hey, this is why they're doing the escalation. They're not trying to be cheap. They're just trying to be sensible. You know, and a lot of times I want to make sure I have the confidence that the agent can present the escalation clause in the right way. So I have that conversation with them. The next line, the palindrome, this happened to me by accident about 3 months ago, and we offered the mirror image number, and I had a string of 7 contracts in a row that were all palindromes that I won every multiple offer, like 7 in a row. It was crazy. So now I'm completely, I'm not superstitious normally, but because that happened, I was like, okay, I throw that in there. If somebody's in a dire situation, it usually makes them laugh too, which sometimes lightens the mood. But I usually say, throw it in there, make the number interesting. And believe it or not, more often than not, when I've won these, the listing agent says, how'd you come up with that number? And then I explain it. So Palindrome's fun. Deposits, the standard here was always 1,000 up front, and then the big chunk after inspections. We're starting to lump it all up front. So we put the whole big deposit up front and call it a day. Now I know in Delaware that's a lot riskier because you can't get out of contracts as easily as you can in Pennsylvania. So I amended this and I said, splitting it in two, 50-50, or whatever amount that the buyer is comfortable sort of not, I don't want to say risking, but again, the inspection period in Delaware is so different and touchier than Pennsylvania that I always get nervous gambling too much up front. But making a bigger first deposit sometimes speaks volumes. Settlement date, I generally will always tell the listing agent that it's flexible if the buyer agrees that it's flexible. And I always tell a buyer, I'm like, if you can't be flexible on settlement date, you might lose the deal. So is there a reason why you can't? And generally buyers are pretty flexible unless they're settling on a house or something. But I always try to make that flexible. And again, it's with regard to financing timeframes and things like that. So I always like to make sure the listing agent knows that it's flexible. The acceptance date, and I think this has been one of those things that actually Delaware doesn't have an acceptance date, do they?
No, but I always write it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to that habit. That's a good idea. But in Pennsylvania, there's a specific line for acceptance date. So I always tell buyers, look, put yourself in the seller's shoes. They're going to have potentially 6 to 30 offers to review. So it's overwhelming. So if you force them to make a decision quickly, that's not going to look good upon, on you. Now, if the buyer's offering something irresistible, like no inspections and cash purchase and X amount over list price, if there's every reason why the seller should consider it, then fine. But if there's any contingencies in there that are going to be, somewhat in question, then give the sellers the opportunity to process it. Sometimes that, that sort of understanding and that sympathetic approach is going to help, because then, they know your buyer's not being difficult. Mortgage commitment date, I generally, our preferred lender up here is White Cap Mortgage. They offer something called a power purchase approval, which is basically, it's already been through underwriting. They've got all the documentation. So it's essentially like a mortgage commitment in advance. So I ask buyers to take the time, submit everything that they need to do the power purchase, because then we can get a commitment very quickly once an appraisal is done and lock it down. I think that's really important for a seller to have everything locked up as quickly as possible, so they're not awaiting a question about the appraisal or a question about the buyer's finances. So I usually try to do it fast. I always make sure that it's okay with the lender. I don't promise without okaying it with the lender, but I try to do it quickly. The appraisal. All right. We've run into a lot of situations here where buyers are guaranteeing to make up the difference in appraisal. Buyers are guaranteeing a certain amount over the appraised value if it comes in short. That's certainly something you want to think about if you've got buyers that are losing because of price or anything like that. It's something interesting to write in there. It could set you apart from other buyers who haven't thought about that. Any questions on that and how to address that, or the script to have with your client?
I agree with that one. I almost lost the deal because it appraised $45,000 below contract price, and thank God the buyer felt it was worth it and moved on.
Wow.
With the deal and put it in. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I just did one and it was clearly overpriced. It was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath. I'm like, you're never going to get this price for that. I don't care how nicely fixed up it is. It does boil down to square footage and attributes and things like that. And, but the buyer said, look, we're happy to contribute $5,000 more. It was a $400,000 house, so they felt like it was 1%. If they couldn't afford 1% over the value of the house, then they shouldn't be buying it. So they kind of logically went through it and said, we'd be willing to guarantee that. And that really stood out to the listing agent, and was able to share that with the seller. Hey, look, they're throwing in an extra $5,000 if it doesn't appraise, which they were already concerned about it not appraising. So, we're addressing the elephant in the room. We're not waiting for the appraisal to come in and be surprised. We're talking about it in advance and saying, here's our solution. We're willing to contribute. I said up to the offer price. So if it appraised at 2,500 short, they weren't going to pay, more than the contract price. So that's a good little trick. The inspections, this is the tricky section. So this is going to be difficult, I think, but we can talk through this. So inspection, really, truly, you only need one inspection to be able to terminate, in a sense. So in Pennsylvania especially, something can happen on the home inspection and everything else doesn't matter. So for different ways, if you go down, on the second page, I have a section here called as is clauses. And these are things that I've come up with to offer different types of limitations to the inspection. So it's not a free-for-all, it's more controlled. So the first one says, buyers accept the property in as is condition and will make no requests for repairs or additional credit from the seller. Buyers reserve the right to terminate the contract on or before the date stipulated in section 21. So by the date that you have to have the response to the seller, they can terminate. But they can't repairs. Somebody's connected weird. Everybody all right? So this allows them to terminate, which doesn't normally happen in Delaware. You can't just terminate, but it's also saying we're not going to make any requests for repairs or credit. So I recently did this actually down in Rehoboth. So I sold my first house in Rehoboth, and we did this very clause, and that enabled us, in my opinion, to be able to get a much better sale price that the buyers were really happy with. And when they did the inspections, there was nothing significant. There was something a little bit more significant than they expected to come up, but it wasn't enough for them to terminate. So it made the process really easy. And I think it also gave them a leg up in getting this in advance at a better price than they expected to get it. So that one, I think, worked really well. But you really have to set the tone to say, you cannot ask for anything. Like you're saying you're not going to, so don't go back on your word. If you want to ask for things, then these next two work great. And I've called it max repairs and minimum repairs, and you'll see why. Buyers agree not to request the seller to make any repairs to the property in response to the buyer's inspections if the total cost of all repairs is less than $2,500. So you're basically setting a price limit that you have to exceed with necessary repairs. So if something significant comes up, structural or a roof or whatever, that's going to exceed 2,500. Now that number can change. It could be 1,000, it could be 5,000, 10,000, whatever you want. And then if the total cost of all repairs exceeds 2,500, buyer may negotiate in accordance with the inspection contingency. And then you can sort of boil it down to something more specific. And this is more about a single item. So buyer agrees not to request the seller to make any repairs for any individual items costing less than 500. So again, that could be 500, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,500, whatever you want. But that means a single item. So if a radon system is needed, then that's going to go over 500. That's not a problem. If a water heater is needed, it'll go over 500. But this eliminates things like GFCI outlets, broken window seals, all those goofy things that are single items under 500. Now, I have run into situations with this one where we came across about $4,500 in electrical issues. What I ended up doing is I presented that to the listing agent and I said, look, this is not an individual item, but it's an individual category and it far exceeds anything that they expected. So, while they don't want to while they don't want to terminate the contract, they also were not prepared to spend $5,000 on electrical. How can we work this out? So I present it in a very, I know we're not supposed to do this, but here's the information that you have. And now that you have it, you know, hopefully we can work something out. And in that case, they did. They split the difference. So they got a credit for half and it was fine. You know, but it's all in the way you present it. You know, it's like, yeah, I understand that we told you we wouldn't, but this is really truly the surprise. And we don't want to terminate, but this is why we're doing this. Is there any questions on those or any concerns or any other ideas?
You get around when you have a VA loan.
Because of VA required repairs?
Yep.
I will say, I'll talk to the buyer and say, if you assume responsibility for any VA required repairs up to a certain amount.
Okay.
So like I'll say up to $1,000. You have to set an amount, because if it's suddenly a $5,000 repair and the buyer doesn't have the ability to do it, then you're stuck. But I always set a certain amount. So buyer assumes responsibility for all lender required repairs or VA required repairs.
Yeah, but how do we do that? You have to fix those items before settlement, right?
Yeah, then if I'll usually have a conversation with the agent and say, we'll need access to the property prior to, and then the buyer just needs to understand that if for whatever reason they don't get their financing, you know, they're repairing a property that they're, you know, not going to own. You have to kind of explain those risks, but generally it works out. And you know, if everybody's getting across the finish line, I would say most agents usually try to, you know, figure it out. So they'll explain to the seller that they need to grant the buyer access in order to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's why I lost the multiple offer situation, because it was a VA loan. We made a strong offer of $50,000 in maximum escalation and $1,000 increments, but they didn't choose us because we had a VA loan with 0 down. So I lost that. So if I had put maybe in there,
right,
that the buyer is willing to fix up to $1,000.
Yep.
I might have.
And it's funny because I had a buyer looking in Newcastle County that was getting increasingly frustrated because they kept losing, and they were FHA financing. And so we got to the point where the buyer was very handy. He was able to fix anything in the house. He wasn't afraid of anything he found. And I said, you know, Manny, I said, you need to put in a clause that states you're going to take care of any FHA required repairs. You know, we'll set a threshold so that you're not, you know, getting yourself in too deep. But you know, it was a way to compensate for the concern that sellers have for FHA, but he still lost several times because they were just like, no, we just prefer conventional, you know, but you got to try, you know, and if the buyer's willing to do it, it sometimes works.
Okay.
So if we go back up, inspection contingency date, you know, it's tough. It's tough to shorten those dates because inspectors are really busy, at least they are up here. And so sometimes I hate to extend, but if you can do what you can to say we're going to get the inspections resolved as quickly as possible, that's great. When I did this up here for our team, I put this because I feel like sometimes people view the listing agent as competition, and that's generally not a Keller Williams philosophy, but I think it's really important to take extra steps to make sure the listing agent knows you, and if they don't know you, know why they would want to work with you. So my offer packages are always 100% complete. I'm never missing an item because I don't want to be that agent that they're chasing for information, because it makes their job harder. So I want to make their job as easy as possible because that helps my client. So I do that. I always summarize the terms of the contract and any special items in the email so that they have a quick cheat sheet on what's ahead in all the attachments. So I have a very standardized template that I use when I submit an offer. And I just load the template in my email, and then I fill in the blanks and I highlight everything that's in there that they're going to want to know. I copy the lender on it. I don't know if I wrote that down. Oh yeah, I consider having the lender reach out to listing agent. So I copy the lender on the email. If I feel like there's a question about the power purchase, I put Sarah's phone number in the email. So again, they don't have to hunt for the phone number. They could just call from the email. So
Can you share that letter?
I can, yeah. Yep. And so I want to make it really easy for the listing agent to get what we're presenting. And then text or call the agent after emailing to confirm receipt. I generally just always send a text because I don't know, I don't want to talk on the phone more than I have to, and I kind of feel like most people feel that way. So I text them real quick, give them my name and number, and say, just sent the contract over, just let me know that you got it. There is, under this extras category, I did send this a few times, and I feel like this is a nice way to make sure you're at the top of the list. I sent a text that this is David Williams from that Fetick team. Good luck reviewing all the contracts with the sellers on such and such an avenue tonight. If there's anything I can do to answer while you're with them, please give me a call. I feel like that's just a great thing to have there, because if there is a question that comes up, they can reach you really quickly. And you've proactively set that tone that you'll be there ready to answer. You guys don't need this, so scratch number 2, because all the dates are outlined nicely in the Delaware contract, whereas Pennsylvania is stipulated on the execution date, which sometimes then other dates fall on weekends, which is a pain in the ass.
Okay, but I have a problem with this because a lot of our dates do end on the weekends, and I'm constantly yelling at people to stop having my dates end on weekends.
Oh, they do?
All the time, because they put 15 days after ratification.
Oh, well, no, don't do that. Just pick a date. Say, this is Delaware, for Pete's sake. Delaware likes to pick dates. That's the one thing I love about the Delaware contract. It's all very easy. The dates are there. It's like,
well, I like your line. I'm going to steal it and put it on the bottom of the contract instead of having to change every contract that I get.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
Initial at once.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, because I don't list many houses in Delaware, so I'm usually writing the contract. So I always pick dates that are during the week. But I didn't realize other agents don't. Good grief, I just want to slap that person. Oh my God. We work 7 days a week as it is. Well, we do everything we can do not to have to work weekends.
I'm doing one stupid deal, and my last 3 Sundays at 6 o'clock, I always get a call from this agent. Oh, this is you. I'm like, yeah, well, this is Sunday.
I can't tell you how many times I go home in a bad mood because it's Friday night and I've left a couple things going. I've got 3 things that I got to resolve before I go to bed Friday night. It makes me angry all the time.
I'm about to get a second phone number just to call it my office number, so I don't have to pick it up when I'm not working.
Yeah, yeah. So after the as-is clauses, I always say send the contract in fast and make it strong. There is a psychology to being the first offer in the door. So I like to set that tone with the clients too. And then the last one is always assume that your client will not have the opportunity to counter. Let the listing agent know. And this one's painful for me too, because I feel like I always tell people, look, the buyer can't predict what matters to the seller. There's obvious things like price and the security of the contract. We know what the obvious things are, but if there's something in there that would really mean a lot to the seller that we didn't think of, call me. It might be very easy for the buyer to change. So, I try to set that tone to say, we've tried to anticipate what the seller is going to want, but we don't know for sure. So if settling 2 days later makes a difference, or if a bigger deposit makes a difference, just ask the question. So, because I feel like there's some agents that just don't think to do that. They're like, oh, well, you presented the offer. We thought that was it. Well, but why didn't you at least ask? So that's it. That's all I've got. Was it at all helpful?
I got a lot.
Yeah.
I got a lot out of it.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. David.
Happy to do it. So I will send a copy of the, I'll send a copy of my template that I use when I submit an offer. I'm not going to change anything in it. So some of the language you might be like, well, I don't need that. So just customize it how you want. But I'll send that out shortly. All right.
Thank you very much, sir.
Any questions for me?
I have a question, Dave.
Yeah.
Now, I'm fairly new. I just wanted to know, what is a typical language of an escalation clause in a contract?
The typical language of an escalation clause is that a buyer will go up to a set price in increments of another set value over the next highest offer. So basically, it's like eBay. So if you've ever bid on eBay, you set a threshold of the max you're willing to pay for the item, and you set the increment. So if somebody else makes an offer, so let's go back to the original 375. So if the house is listed at 350 and you're willing to go up to 377.5, and your offer is 360, if somebody else comes in at 360 370, you will escalate in $2,500 increments over that. So then your offer becomes 372.5 up to the 377. So you won't go beyond that.
Right. But your first offer, would that be 375 or
First offer could be whatever it is. I always tell people to at least do list price plus a little bit. So, if you're going to do list price, like if the list price is 350, do 355 or 360 to show that you're serious and you understand why, and then you're escalating up to another number.
and they see your maximum amount that you're willing to pay?
They do. And that's where I want to make sure that the listing agent knows how to work that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a way to present that without making it look like the buyer's being cheap. You can present that like, and I've done this in the past, we've had like 3 offers on a property. One was a certain price, one was another price, and one was a cash offer. I say, hey, this one's got an escalation clause, but it actually escalates over the first offer, but the cash offer, if we can get them up to this price, what do you think? So I present that to the seller, and usually it can work out pretty well. But again, you really have to have that conversation with the listing agent to understand they know how to present it.
I see. Okay. All right.
Anything else? All right. Well, if anybody needs anything, you'll have my email address. So shoot me an email or give me a call.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.